Sorry, I got a phone call that I actually really had to take. So, last layer of the epidermis is the stratum corneum. It is the uppermost layer. It's the one that we actually see, okay? So it is the most superficial layer. It's 25 or more layers of dead squamous cells that are cornified, that are hard, and they're actually dead by the time that they get here, especially since the granulosum is where they start to die. If you look here, do you see the yellow that's kind of smeared in between the cells? That's actually from the lamellar bodies that got released down here in the granulosum. You can still see that there are also desmosomes that are kind of holding the cells together. Now, those desmosomes eventually are going to break down because the cells are no longer keeping them up. They're no longer keeping them healthy, I'll say. There's no repair work going into them. That is also one of the reasons why these cell layers slough off. So as far as function goes, this is the structural strength by the keratin within the cells, the soft keratin. Soft keratin is the keratin fibers in the keratohyalin. Hard keratin is actually found in nails and hair, and it has a higher sulfur content. That's one of the reasons why when you smell burning hair, it kind of smells like brimstone because you're actually burning sulfur. So what does it do? Why do we have it? Well, one, it prevents, of course that's going to happen. It prevents water loss. Not only because it's filled with keratin and it makes little shields, but also because of that smeared lipid that we saw from the lamellar bodies. Sloughing off of the most superficial layers is also what resists abrasion. So we get caught on the corner of a desk, we may, lose a few layers of cells, but it's not like we lose our skin, okay? Desmosomes, like I said, will eventually break. Now, an example of excessive sloughing would be dandruff, when your body's making and sloughing off way too many layers of the stratum corneum. Now, something else that I want to mention, the stratum corneum in thin skin is actually a lot thinner than what you find in thick skin. If you look at your lab slides, the difference between thick and thin skin, you can see the stratum corneum is a lot more layers than in thin skin. So, classified based on the structure of the epidermis, thick versus thin skin. So the thickness of our skin, the epidermis plus the dermis, varies depending on the location. So for example, on your eyelid, you only have about 0.5 millimeter of skin. Okay. On your shoulder, however, your back, you're talking about 5 millimeters. That's 10 times the amount. So I can go up to a wall and, slide down on my back and I'm not going to have an issue with, I tore my skin off. However, if you think about doing that with your eyelid, probably won't, right? And every girl who's listening to this lecture has had that one stupid type of mascara that you bought that you couldn't get off. So you kept rubbing at your eye and eventually it started burning. That's because that little teeny tiny amount of skin that's there, it wasn't enough to actually protect and you were actually getting through it. So, skin subjected to excessive friction. XSV is just my abbreviation for excessive, or pressure, will eventually develop a callus. Okay, I'm sure everybody knows what a callus is. But they can develop anywhere. It's not just on thick skin. It doesn't necessarily have to be on the palm of your hand. If you're using a part of your body over and over and over again, your body's protective instinct is to make a calluses in that area. So my brother who has cerebral palsy doesn't really use his left hand. His left hand is actually curled fairly far under his arm. So he tends to use his wrist for leverage, and he actually has a calluses on his wrist because that's what he uses it for. Now, a corn is a bit different. So a callusis, if I've got skin, a callusis is just going to kind of be this evenly distributed extra corneum on top. Okay? But if you have a corn kind of looks like a spike. Okay, so every time you put pressure on this spike is digging into your flesh. So a corn is this cone shaped callus. Okay, and it usually develops over bony processes that extend deep into the epidermis, and it's very painful. Women get these quite a bit because of high heel shoes. High heel shoes tend to put pressure on the bones on the foot, and it's always in the same spot over and over and over. And as much as I would like to say, Dr. Scholl's, yeah, no, Dr. Scholl's isn't going to do anything except kind of put some padding around it. To get rid of a corn, you actually have to have it surgically removed. So thick versus thin skin. Thick skin has all 5 layers of the epidermis, including the stratum lucidum. Okay. The other thing that it has is it has a lot of extra stratum corneum. So the stratum corneum ends up being fairly thick as well. It is found in areas that are subjected to pressure and friction. Like I said, your hands, your feet. What do you do with those? Well, you walk on your feet. If you are capable of walking, you walk on your feet to go to the bathroom, you walk on your feet to get in bed, you walk on your feet when you go to the grocery store, you walk on your feet. Your hands. Think about everything that you use your hands for. If I'm going to make a meal, I have to use my hands. If I'm going to write, I have to use my hands. If I'm going to grab something, I have to use my hands. Having that extra thick skin there is protective. Okay. And again, it's pressure and friction. That's what we're subjecting these parts of our body to. So you find it, like I said, palms, the underside of your fingers, and the soles of your feet. So, thin skin, that's pretty much everywhere else. You only have 4 layers, so that stratum lucidum is completely missing, and the corneum is not as thick. It covers the rest of your body. The granulosum in thin skin is usually only 1 to 2 layers of cells. It's not 4 to 5 layers. Hair is also only found in thin skin. You don't find it in thick skin. And if you think about it from an evolutionary standpoint, that makes sense. If you have furry feet and you're trying to get away from a predator, that's like putting on the fuzzy socks and trying to run on a linoleum floor. Okay? So, not having hair on the bottom of your feet, beneficial. Same with your hands. Think about wearing furry gloves and trying to catch prey. It just wouldn't work out really, really well. Um, Something else with thin skin, it is more flexible than thick skin. I can take the back of my hand and pinch it and make it into kind of a tent. Try doing that with the palm of your hand. You can't, because that skin in that area is not that flexible. Okay, so let's talk skin color. Skin color is determined by the pigments that you have in your skin, the blood circulating through your skin, as well as the thickness of the stratum corneum. So, if you put your palm facing you with one hand and the back of your hand right next door to it, you can see the difference between the coloring on your palm and the coloring on the back of your hand. Normally, the coloring on the back of your hand is going to be darker than what you have on your palm. All right, so let's talk melanin. So it's a group of pigments that's responsible for our skin color, our hair color, and our eye color. Its job is to provide UV protection. High melanin areas include freckles, moles, the nipples, the areola of the breast, the axilla, which is a very fancy way of saying your armpit, and the genitalia. Low melanin areas include your palms and your lips. So your lips are pink because you're actually seeing the blood underneath. You're not seeing the color of skin because there's not a lot of color there. Melanin itself originates from tyrosine and can be changed into several different pigments, ranging from black-brown to red-yellow. Now, the recipe that your melanocytes use determines what color you end up with. So for my hair is naturally very, very dark, almost a jet black color. It's a dark, dark brown. I know you see it as purple, but I digress. Either way, um, what that means is for my melanocytes, when they're making the melanin, I have more of this black brown pigment than I have red yellow. If you've got somebody who has blonde hair, then those melanocytes are definitely making a lot more of the yellow in the red yellow than black brown. If you have somebody who has very fair skin, again, you're making more of the red yellow than you are the black brown. If you have somebody who has very deep dark skin, then you've got more black brown being made in the recipe than you have red yellow. Technically, you have both. Now, let's talk about that UV protection. So, how do I explain this? Think about somebody standing in the sunlight, right? And it's very, very bright outside, and they're getting, sunlight beaten down on them, right? What happens if they take out, that is the most awful umbrella I've ever drawn. Okay, they take out an umbrella, right? Again, terrible umbrella, just go with me on my horrible drawing journey. When the light comes down and hits, it hits the umbrella and doesn't necessarily go further to hit the person, right? That's the hope of having an umbrella. Your melanocytes deposit color into your skin cells. And when they do that, basically the light is getting absorbed into those dark cells. So here's a dark cell. It's getting absorbed into here and it doesn't go past that cell anymore, just like the umbrella. Instead, it hits this absorbs it, and then nothing gets damaged down here. That's the theory behind why we have melanocytes and why, when we go out in the sunlight, we tend to tan. Now, I know because my dad is white that there's somebody out there going, oh, but I can't tan. I just burn. Okay. So, in other words, your cells are working. They're just making yellow instead of black brown. Okay. So, your skin may be tanning, quote unquote, but it's not doing what, let's say, Hispanic skin does. Okay. So let's look at this picture down here, this figure. This green dude right here is a melanocyte. Melanocytes are found in the stratum basale. That is where they live. They never move anywhere. They don't slough off. They stay in that area. But while they're in that area, they make these little dudes right here. See these little dudes? These little bubbles, these little vesicles? These are called melanosomes, okay? Melanosomes carry color, all right? So they actually are like a little bundle of color. And the melanocyte has these extensions, almost like fingers, that are getting made, that are stretching up into the stratum spinosum. Okay? Now, this is the interesting part about that. The cells in the stratum spinosum endocytose chunks of these fingers. And when they do that, those little vesicles that are housing color get put inside of these cells. So the cells get darker. So if you look up here, you'll notice that these cells are all carrying color that they've bitten off a finger of this melanocyte. Okay? So the melanosomes are the bubbles that are produced by the melanocyte, and the epithelial cells phagocytize them, they eat them, and end up with color within them. Okay? So, again, this is how we transfer color to the upper layers of my skin. Okay? So, Melanin production. It's based on three things. First and foremost, genetic factors. Different races or those within the same race can have different genetics and basically show different traits. What's the recipe of melanin that we're using? Do we have more black brown in that recipe? Do we have more red yellow? Depending on what my genetics says, that's the recipe that my melanocyte follows. The size, number, and distribution of melanosomes. Notice I said somes, I didn't say sites. Remember, melanosomes are these bubble things, okay? Not the cells, the bubble things, the vesicles. So, something that's kind of interesting. The number of melanocytes to each person doesn't change. Somebody who is lily white, like Snow White from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, has just as many melanocytes as somebody from deepest, darkest Africa. The difference is this. What's the recipe I'm using? How big are those vesicles? What number am I making? And where am I distributing them? Push comes to shove, that's what that is, okay? Now, that's what that says. The number of melanocytes usually doesn't change. It's the amount of melanin that does. One mutation can lead to albinism. Albinism means that they don't produce any color. And it literally is one point mutation that causes this disease. People who are true albinos have pink eyes like an albino bunny because they make no color at all. Their hair will be white and their eyes will be pink. Now, something that's interesting, and you may say, well, I've got light eyes. Yeah, but they're not pink. The melanin inside of your iris that gives you the color of your eye is also protective from sunlight. Most albino people who have the whole pink eye thing going on, like albino bunnies, end up blind very young. We're talking they're blind usually by their 20s, okay? And it literally is because the UV light from the sun damages their retina anytime they go out in sunlight, okay? Now, what else influences your melanin production? I don't think this is going to be a big 411 to anybody, but exposure to light. It's kind of doing two things. So I go outside into the hot South Texas sun. The melanin that is already in my cells, those melanosomes that have already been phagocytized by the cells, darkens. So it actually gets darker inside of the cells that are carrying it. That's one. But the second thing that happens is my melanocyte gets stimulated to make more of those little melanosomes. So it's kind of double. It's not only the color in my skin that's already there is darkening, but the cell that makes the color starts kind of doing double duty and is like, okay, let me hurry up and make some more. Another thing that can influence my skin color, hormones. So, pregnancy induces the production of estrogen and progesterone, and it also starts the production of melanocyte. Let's try that again. Melanocyte stimulating hormone. So, what do you think it's stimulating when it's called melanocyte stimulating hormone? Right, melanocytes. So, they start kind of working harder and making more of those little melanosome bubbles holding color. If you've ever seen a pregnant woman who has a line down the center of her belly, that's because of the hormone expression. Also, they tend to have darker nipples, areola, and genitalia. Some women will even develop what people call the mask of pregnancy, and it literally is a discoloration that kind of looks like a mask on their face, like they're a raccoon. Addison's disease is actually a malfunction of our adrenal gland. Our adrenal gland is what's making the melanocyte stimulating hormone. And the thing about Addison's disease is the person looks fantastic. It looks like they just came back from a beach. Everybody's like, oh my God, you go to the beach? And they're like, no. And they feel horrible because other things are happening other than them just getting a tan. The problem with Addison's disease is a lot of times they go to a doctor and they say, I feel terrible. And the doctor thinks that they're full of it. So the doctor ignores them and, yeah, sure, you feel bad, whatever. When in actuality, they are very, very sick. A few years back, there was a little boy. The foster mother was accused of killing the little boy by making him eat salt. That is actually a symptom of Addison's disease. Them wanting to eat salt like that because their body is losing salt faster than they can get it into their body by eating just regular food. So I kind of wonder if that's what the case was. All right. So these are things that influence melanin production in the human body. So the other two things that we talk about when we talk about skin color, erythema. Erythro means red, okay? That's why we call red blood cells erythrocytes, because it means red. The blood flowing through your skin does impart a reddish hue to the surface of your body. It can be induced by an inflammatory response. Somebody comes up and smacks your leg, you're going to have that handprint. That's an inflammatory response. Also, colds. Ugh, I'm so sick, right? What gets red? Your nose. Why? Because you keep putting Kleenex up against it and rubbing. Blushing, flushing when you're angry or you're hot. You know, you go outside and it's 125 degrees and you're like, oh, right? That redness in your face is because of the blood flowing under your skin. When somebody goes into shock, you will see a decrease in blood flow. Somebody gets really, really scared, they go pale. That actually does influence the color of their skin because it leaches all of that red out of their skin. Cyanosis, cyan means blue. So cyanosis is another change to the skin color that actually does have to do with the blood because it means there's a lack of oxygen. Now, something else, you do not have blue blood. Blood in your body is never, ever blue. It can go from a bright, bright red to a dark, dark maroon, but it is never blue. Octopi have blue blood because instead of using iron, they use copper. Horseshoe crabs have blue blood because they use copper instead of iron as well, but we don't. Okay. And I know you're going, but when I look, I've got blue. No, it's a trick of the light and a difference in wavelength because it's going through tissues. And if you really want an explanation about that, I will give you one if you ask, but just suffice to say, you don't have blue blood. Okay, and then finally, keratin. Now notice this time it is with a C, so we are talking Bugs Bunny carrots. It is a yellow pigment found in plants. Usually it is ingested in our food, and it is a source of vitamin A. Vitamin A is what we use to make retinol. Retinol is used in our retina so that we can see. Excess ingestion of keratin can actually cause skin discoloration, basically making somebody turn an orange color like fake bake. Okay, the fake tan, yeah, we end up looking orange like a Cheeto. So you can discolor your skin this way. Do not go home and give somebody a pound of carrots. Don't do that because the other issue with that is they're also going to have diarrhea and it's going to make them sick. So don't do that. But it can influence your skin color. That's the main thing to take away.